Wayfair's Labor Day clearance is on now. Right now at Wayfair, you can get up to 70% off everything home. Shop Wayfair's Labor Day clearance now through September 7th at wayfair.ca.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This Labor Day weekend, experience Taste of Manitoba presented by Manitoba Liquor Mart. September 3rd through 7th at Fort Gibraltar. Savor incredible dishes from 20 of Manitoba's favorite local restaurants. Enjoy local beverages, live entertainment, and daily theme days. Plus, explore the Travel Manitoba Vendor Village. If you can't make it, you can skip Taste of Manitoba right to your door.
Entrance is free, so join us for Taste of Manitoba September 3rd to 7th at Fort Gibraltar. Get tickets at tasteofmb.com. Please drink responsibly.
Story this week about Francization here for newcomers to Quebec, and I think the headline in this story says it all. The headline is, Quebec's program for teaching French to new arrivals in their workplace does not offer them, quote, a realistic change of success. That, according to Quebec's French language commissioner, Benoit Dubreuil, in remarks made earlier this week in his 24-25 annual report to the National Assembly. Benoit Dubreuil is on the line. Benoit, welcome back. Let me begin by asking my first question, which is, when you say doesn't offer them a realistic change of success, what do we mean by realistic exactly?
Yeah, I mean a pathway in which most people would succeed within reasonable time frame. Yes.
So what is that? When you say succeed, then what are we talking about? These are people who are training on the job, and what happens? What did you find in your study, your analysis?
Yeah, just maybe some background before. Like we have the government of Quebec that has to offer free French courses to basically anyone who lives in Quebec and who is interested in learning French. And last year we took a look at the offer that is done for individuals, that is people who learn French outside of the workplace. This year we decided to turn our attention to people who learn French in the workplace. So it is a very small component, Aaron. We are talking about approximately like 4,000 or 5,000 people. I think it's like 4% of all people who learn French in government courses. So what we do is that we document the challenges that are associated with this program. The objective of the program is basically help to generalize the use of French in the workplace, have people acquire the skills that will allow them to do their tasks in French. And the main challenges that we document is that people typically, who enroll in the program, start from scratch. So basically, they have no prior knowledge of French whatsoever, and then the intensity of training is very low. So we are talking about people who study French maybe 2, 3, or 4 hours per week. And the challenge is that if you start from zero and you only have like maybe 3 hours of course per week, it will take many years before you reach the level where you can actually work in French. So that's the number one challenge that we document.
Okay, so my question would then be, and I think you mentioned, or in the article it says that of those people that you've just described, almost a quarter of them end up dropping out. And I'm guessing for the main reason that it's just it's difficult, and it's a difficult language to learn. So what's the recommendation here? Because you're outlining a problem. How's that problem best addressed?
Yeah, that's not a challenge that is only in the workplace French training, by the way. It's also what we see outside of, for people who learn French outside of the workplace. Basically, people who learn French part-time, they will learn it maybe for 100 hours, 200 hours, which is only a small fraction of the time that would be needed to reach a very significant level. So basically, we would need people to stay much longer in French courses if they are really to master French at a level that would make them very at ease conversing in French. So how are we going to address this? The problem, Aaron, is time, because people they need to work and they don't have that much energy, they don't have that much time available. And the problem is that if it is the government that is going to support people by giving subsidies or giving grants to people to learn French, it becomes very, very expensive for you, for me, for other taxpayers. So we have a problem here. We need to share a bill that can be pretty big. So the question is, what are we asking to employers? What are we asking to newcomers? And what can the government pay that is realistic to generalize the use of French on the labor market, which is the objective of the Charter of the French language? So
let me go back to some of those points. With respect to employers who already pay into the system, what more do you want to have from them, or what should they be doing differently than they already are?
Yeah. So we already have a lot of employers who will hire people who already have prior knowledge of French. So I think one of the challenges that we have right now is that a lot of employers, especially in the 3, 4, 5 last years, have hired temporary foreign workers that have no prior knowledge of French whatsoever. And that's really the people that we see in those French courses. And the pressure, especially now, is for these employers that, given the recent cap imposed by the federal government, many of them are going to lose their temporary foreign workers. So a lot of people right now are kind of rushing to try to learn French, to try to be selected for permanent residency. So for me, there's something that we felt in our planning of the labor force over the past 3, 4, 5 years. I think we need to change our approach to how we recruit temporary foreign workers, ask for some basic knowledge of French at entry point, and then make sure also maybe increase the pressure on employers to make people more available for learning French.
Okay, so are we talking then about is the recommendation only people from countries that speak French or where people have a basic knowledge of French as opposed to everyone else?
Yeah, I don't think that we should have like that type of strong barrier. The thing is that employers should be incentivized to recruit people who have prior knowledge of French. We are lucky to have a large international language, 30 countries where French is well implemented. So we already have a lot of employers who specifically target these countries in recruiting foreign workers. But at the same time, we don't want to have a barrier on other countries that would be too dramatically high. So my recommendation is that for other workers, at least ask that they did a few hundreds of hours before they get their work permit. Because if they have already like maybe the beginner stage that is completed, then the integration in the workplace will be much easier, and they will be much more likely to succeed in their migratory project.
So that suggestion or that recommendation is that they take those 100 hours, whatever they would be, before they come to Quebec. Yeah,
I think in the case of the temporary foreign workers, I think it would make sense. Or we can arrange different system where people would come to Quebec and then get an intensive learning before they start their work. But basically, the problem is that once people start working 40 hours per week, it just becomes very, very difficult to get the number of hours that people started. So we kind of never get there. And then we end up like 3, 4, 5 years later and say, oh, what happened? And then we just suddenly realize that we have a whole bunch of people, and then we don't qualify for permanent residency, but who came here with the hope of qualifying for permanent residency, and it creates a situation that is not comfortable for anyone as we have right now.
So you're kind of making it seem that if you're going to come here under this program, a temporary workers program, you take a course from the country you're already in, or as you're suggesting, maybe come here before you start that job and pass it here. But let's say you're taking it in another country. So we're basically saying you will have to take pass a language test, a French test, in order to eventually be admitted to come to work in Quebec.
I think in general, we should make sure that when people join Quebec labor market, they already have some basic knowledge of French.
But is basic enough? You're making the impression that basic is not enough.
Well, I mean, the higher the better. I think if you don't have like at least, I don't want to be using jargon, but if you don't have like maybe 300-400 hours of French, you cannot engage even in simple conversation with people, then it will be probably way more difficult once you're in Quebec to actually get the number of hours that will get you started. Because when you start learning a language, like the first 100 of hours, you cannot really use it, right? You need to have a number of words. You need to understand the basic of the grammar. But then when you reach the kind of intermediate stage, then you can take advantage of immersion. And that's where the dynamic totally changes. Like if you have Francophone colleagues, then it totally changes the dynamic. What you learn, you can practice it automatically in the workplace. So it totally changed the game.
Just as a last question, does this in essence, though, if the government accepts this recommendation, does this in essence close the door to temporary foreign workers right now who don't meet this criteria?
I don't think so. I think it would help people get more prepared and to arrive in Quebec in a way that will put them in a better position to succeed on the labor market. Because, like the knowledge of French is also a precondition to be really successful on Quebec labor market. And we have, I think, a lot of people who come here and they kind of underestimate this reality, but then they kind of get stuck because they don't really have the time to learn it. And I guess a lot of people would have liked to know better just how important it is. And I think that have people kind of try to learn French before they arrive will help them realize and become more conscious of whether or not they are really ready to engage in this long-term learning.
All right, we leave it at that. Benoit, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.